Welcome to Still Moments Studio. My name's Paula. Thanks for joining me. Today I'm going to get started on this flower scene. I've grabbed a couple of these flowers on my reference photo and I've placed them in a nice positioning on my 5x7 watercolor paper. For the flowers themselves, I will be using cadmium red and cadmium yellow. Those are both very bright, warm colors. You can see them on my palette right here. That's a little bit of an orange red and a bright yellow. For the stems, I would use oxide of chromium as one of my favorite greens. It's just a very nice dusty green. You can see that right here in the center. And French ultramarine is a very nice shadow, so that I will add that to the oxide of chromium to make it a little bit more shadowy on the underneath sides. And for my sky, I'll be using cobalt blue. It's just a very beautiful, brilliant mid-tone blue. Right here you can see it. The first techniques I would advise any type of beginner is to have a little stack of paper towels. A lot of times I will stick that underneath my water so that I can make sure that I'm controlling my water. One of the hardest things for first-time watercolorists is using way too much water. And that's fine if you're trying to create kind of a bleeding effect of colors going into one another. But if you're trying to create layering, you need to kind of control your water a little bit more. And a lot of times you'll just dip, but then you'll also brush off most of that water so that you're able to just do light washes, and it's a lot faster, so I don't have to wait for this to dry or use a blow dryer to get it to dry faster, though that is an option if you're having trouble with how much water. And then I would grab some yellow or whatever color you're going to work with first. This is going to be for the flowers. And I will go through and touch them. Anywhere where the sun is hitting them, I can leave quite a bit lighter. Then while that dries, I'll go on to another flower. This is the one off to the side right here. Right now is a very good time if I want to make any of the coloring bleed into each other to add an extra little bit of pigment. This is one of the flowers underneath the sheet. I'm trying to mix a puddle over here, and as you can see I would wipe off any extra there so I'm more able, I have just the right amount on my paintbrush. As I moved around into other areas, this one also is dry and ready for another darkening layer. So any area where I think the sun is shining on that one over here, so I would leave that one maybe that original shade, and I would go on to touch up other spots with the next layering of color. So then if I want to lift off any color, I can wipe the extra here and pull it off just with my brush. If I want to make veins as it's drying or anything. So that's another good use for a paper towel. So now that I've done 2 layers and have some variation in colors, I'm going to go ahead and start mixing in just a little bit of the cadmium red in this well. That's why when I squirt my colors into my little wells right here, that's why I like to keep it up on the side, because then I still have pure color here and I can mix down below the tone that I'm trying, or the hue that I'm trying to get. And again, you get it wet and you pull off that drop on the tip. If that's still too much, you can also tap it on your paper towel up there. So as you can tell, that's quite a bit of water still, which I can tap off if it's kind of puddling and getting in my way, and maybe covering over areas that I didn't want quite that dark. Here I am looking a little bit more detailed into the drawing the reference photo over to the side. Do I want to edge it with a little bit of orange, or what do I want to do with the orange as I get a little bit more into the specifics of the coloring and the veins in these flowers? So I'm not just generically filling in the petals anymore. I'm adding the more specific. Now I'm switching down to a smaller brush. Still, it has a very nice point on it so that I can do nearly cadmium red on some of these under, just so there's a variation between the flowers. So now for the stems, I'm going to go ahead and use my small brush again and dampen my green right here. And the new growth is the only part of the stem that is really green. After that, it becomes more of a brown red in through there. Blue-green off to the side. I want to save myself kind of an extra step. It is kind of shadowing, and if you want to make your green into more of a brown green, you would add red to it. So like I said, I was going to try to just stick to using cadmium yellow, cadmium red, and then the other two colors. So I add a bit of the red, gives it kind of more of a dusty look, a little bit more of a gray look, if I wanted to go ahead and use that underneath the flower here. So it adds a little bit more of a shadow tone to the green. Now if I'm careful here, I can leave some of the green edges, the brighter green edges, and it gives it a little bit more dimension than if I were to just solidly go over this with a single color. And if I need to touch it up, I rinse off my brush and just use a damp brush. And then I can kind of soften some of those edges in there so they're not quite so rigid. And this looks like it's a little bit of a petal coming towards me in the reference photo, so I'm leaving that bright green with some darkness around the edges there. And again, this is a petal right here, so I left it so that the edges of the two dry paints next to each other will create that kind of edging for me. So again, over on this side, I'm going to use a little bit of the green with ultramarine blue as a more shadowy green to put in here. So by adding a little bit of the red right here, the cadmium red with the green, it gives me a brown. So you can see as I smear that across the surface. So a lot of the branches in here are a little bit more into the red tones, so that way I can mix the red and the green together and it kind of neutralizes them into a neutral brown tone. So I can create variations here just by those two colors. The young buds in here seem to be a little bit more of a yellow-green, so I'm going to mix my yellow in with just a bit of the green there. So here I'm mixing a dark tone, you can see it right there, for the top of this flower right here. I'm just still using the colors that I have, which would be an ultramarine blue and a cadmium red, and that can create almost like a purple right there. And because they're a little bit off, this isn't a true red, it's a little bit of an orange red. That's how I get that kind of more of a brown tone instead of the purple you might expect from mixing red and blue. And then dropping a little bit of thicker paint in there to give it more of a splattered look. So again, just adding a base layer of coloring, and then adding, when I add the second layer, I don't completely go over the top of the first. I use it to create kind of a second, a three-dimensional look. So as you can see, that gives me 3 layers of depth. I have the original layering, and then I have tones in there that are a second and even a third down into the deeper cracks of that center part of the flower. For the background, I was planning on putting a little bit of blue in there behind these flowers. As you can tell from the reference photo, the blue just comes across right there. So I'm going to go ahead and throw some blue on here and see how this turns out. So really damp your blue. Mine has dried out quite a bit. Put this on my palette a while ago, so I'm going to add a whole bunch of water so that as I'm working I have enough blue and then I have as little dried out lines as possible. If you have a downhill section of your table, obviously turn your palette so that it is puddling without mixing in my red or my purple right next to it there. So as I make this very wet, I do not have this taped down. It will curl and it will do some different things here. So generally I do tape it down, but because I'm on top of my reference photo, so that's visible for the video, I've just left it loose. So this will probably curl a little bit on me as I do this. It's going to be quite a lot of water. I've enjoyed recently using this angled brush to get in there real quick in the backgrounds. Okay, I think that turned out quite well in the background. It's a little bit of a wet on wet technique. I've really enjoyed this angled brush recently. I'm able to get in there quite quickly and flip it back and forth and just zip right through on the backgrounds, and that's been a lot of fun. A lot of times artists will do a little color study of how they want their colors to look. I haven't been lately because I'm just trying to get the paintings out there and trying to get as much practice and study in as I'm able to. So hopefully you've enjoyed this little training video as I've tried to help show both my colors, my water control. Just make sure you kind of dip, but then you also kind of wipe off that big drop that just makes your painting go crazy, and it makes puddle upon puddle, and it's really hard to control unless you're trying to do a wet on wet technique like the background I did very, very fast, and I wanted a lot of water and I wanted it to spread very fast so that it didn't dry out on me, and then I would have had overlapping lines, which I was trying to avoid. Thanks for joining me. Hopefully you've enjoyed this little teaching video on how I generally build up a painting, and we'll catch you next time. Thanks for watching.